James Cleveland saved gospel music, but who saved the children in his home? In 1980, a 13-year-old boy joined Cleveland's choir with dreams of stardom. He lived with the gospel legend, traveled with him, and trusted him completely. But after Cleveland's death, everything changed. The boy filed a shocking lawsuit claiming years of abuse and worse. The case was settled in secret, and the truth was buried. Today, at 55, that same person is breaking his silence about the man the world called a saint, but he knew as something else entirely. James Cleveland was born on December 5, 1931, in Chicago during one of the hardest times in American history. The country was deep in the Great Depression, and millions of people were out of work. In some parts of the country, 1 out of every 4 people had no job. His family lived on the south side of Chicago, one of the poorest areas in the city. His father, Benjamin, worked for a government program that helped people get jobs, but even that wasn't enough. Families in their neighborhood were surviving on just $16 a week, while the national average was around $25. The Cleveland family had very little, and their home was small and cold. Food was hard to come by, and warm clothes were a luxury. What helped them survive was their church. It gave them food, clothes, and hope. That church was not just a building to them. It was life. By the time James was 5 years old, something incredible happened. He opened his mouth in his grandmother's church and sang. His voice didn't sound like the other kids. It was loud, clear, and full of soul. He spent hours trying to copy the songs of Mahalia Jackson, a gospel legend, using a wind-up record player that cost $50, which was about the same as 3 months of rent back then. His grandmother saw his gift and made sure he practiced every day. She taught him the old songs that had been passed down through generations. That little boy with the big voice would one day be called the King of Gospel Music, and it all started there in that small church. But life got even harder when he turned 8. In 1939, his father lost his job after the government cut more than 1.5 million positions. Suddenly, the family had no money. Rent, food, clothes, it was all slipping away. James, just a child, started working. He shined shoes on street corners, earning 5 to 10 cents per pair. Bread cost 8 cents, so even a few polished shoes meant something. He gave up his childhood to help his family survive. That kind of hardship built his character. It taught him how to fight and never give up. That same fire would help him build a future that no one could have imagined. That same year, something else changed. He joined a choir called the Thorn Gospel Crusaders. It had 50 young singers, and James stood out right away. He sang a solo at a church event where over 800 people came to listen. The group traveled around Chicago, performing in churches and halls. James was only 8, but he was already suggesting how songs should be sung. He learned how to read music and arrange it, how to lead voices and build emotion. He was learning how to shape sound, and it was clear he was meant to lead. Even though his music was growing, school life was painful. James was tall, nearly 6 feet by age 12, and had a deep voice. Other kids teased him constantly. He found comfort in his aunt's basement, where an old broken piano became his best friend. It was missing keys, but he didn't care. He taught himself to play by ear. When his family couldn't afford $1 piano lessons, he pretended the windowsills were piano keys and practiced that way for months. When they finally saved $25 for a real piano, he was ready. He began writing songs on scraps of paper and hid them in a shoebox. Some of those songs would later become gospel classics, like Peace Be Still and God Is. As a young boy, James began singing at Pilgrim Baptist Church. one of the most important gospel churches in America. The choir was led by Thomas A. Dorsey, the man many called the father of gospel music. Roberta Martin played the piano. Both were legends. Dorsey even wrote a song just for James to sing. His grandmother was in the choir, so James had deep roots in that church. He even worked as a paperboy and waited outside rehearsals, hoping someone would let him play when a musician didn't show up. Pilgrim Baptist wasn't just his church. It was his school, his stage, and his future. But then, everything changed. During his teenage years, he damaged his voice while singing with a local group. His beautiful soprano was gone forever. What was left was a deep, raspy voice that sounded like no one else. At first, it felt like a curse, but it became his greatest gift. That gravelly tone would define his sound and change gospel music forever. At 17, Roberta Martin recognized his new talent. She published his song, "Grace is Sufficient," making it his first professional success. By age 19 in 1950, James joined the Gospelaires and made his first professional recording. The group included close friends of Roberta Martin. James brought new life to old spirituals. In 1951, their song "Oh, What a Time" became the first to feature his new voice. When the group split, Roberta Martin hired him directly as an arranger and composer. The real breakthrough came in 1954. Though he'd written "Grace is Sufficient" years earlier, it became a hit when he finally recorded it solo. The royalties were $500, a huge amount for him back then, equal to nearly $6,000 today. That money allowed him to quit his day jobs and focus on music full-time. In 1956, at 25, he started a group called the Gospel Chimes. He made a bold move by using an electric organ in gospel music, which many church leaders thought was too modern. But when over 1,000 people showed up for his first concert, it was clear gospel music had entered a new era. His group had both male and female singers, which was also unusual at the time. This was just the beginning of what would become his massive choir movement. 2 years later, he joined Mahalia Jackson on tour. She had once lived on his paper route, but now she was a giant in gospel. James traveled with her for 18 months, learning everything: how to handle big crowds, how to command attention, how to build emotion. She didn't even use microphones, yet she reached 5,000 people with her voice. James soaked it all in. But in 1959, life got tough again. Money was tight, so he took a job as a postal worker. During the day, he delivered mail. At night, he recorded music. His song, "The Love of God," sold 10,000 copies and played in churches across the country. That success gave him the push he needed to quit his job and return to music full-time. Later that year, he moved to Los Angeles. There, he joined the Pilgrim Travelers and took a job as minister of music at Grace Memorial Church. He started experimenting with ways to get the whole audience involved through call and response singing. He began building something big, something no one else had tried. By 1963, at 32, he founded the Southern California Community Choir. He blended jazz rhythms with gospel hymns. People loved it. His gravelly voice mixed with lush harmonies gave gospel music a new sound. His choir quickly became a force in Los Angeles. In 1967, he had an even bigger idea. He invited gospel musicians from all over the country to meet in Detroit. The first official gospel music workshop of America took place in 1968 and brought together about 3,000 people. It wasn't just a meeting, it was a movement. They studied music, learned new techniques, and shared their passion. That workshop became the largest gospel music group in the world. By the end of 1968, Cleveland was building chapters of the workshop across the country. He taught singers how to arrange songs, how to perform, and how to lead. His methods created a whole new generation of gospel stars. By 1969, thousands of singers were using his style, and the GMWA was growing fast. But his biggest musical moment had already come in 1963. That's when he recorded Peace Be Still live in New Jersey. The song was based on a hymn from 1874, but Cleveland made it into something brand new. Billy Preston played the organ. The angelic choir backed him. That record sold nearly 1 million copies and became a gospel classic. It was later added to the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1999. In 1970, he went even further. He started directing choirs with 2,000 or 3,000 singers at once. He created waves of harmony that felt like thunder in a church. His shows were full of power and emotion. Churches across America began copying his style, building larger choirs and stronger music programs. His methods shaped how gospel is sung in big churches even today. In January 1972, something magical happened in a church in Watts, Los Angeles. Aretha Franklin stood beside James Cleveland, and together they created a moment that would change gospel music forever. It wasn't just a concert. It was 2 nights of raw, powerful emotion, with the Southern California Community Choir filling the church with energy. That live album, Amazing Grace, sold over 2 million copies in the United States. It won Aretha a Grammy in 1973 for Best Soul Gospel Performance and became the best-selling live gospel album in history. Cleveland played piano and led the choir. The whole thing was filmed by Sidney Pollack, but the footage stayed unseen for 47 years because of sound issues. When it finally premiered in 2019, people were stunned. Even Mick Jagger and Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones had come to the church back in 1972. Jagger called the moment electrifying. In 1974, James Cleveland released his own version of In the Ghetto, a song that Elvis Presley had made famous in 1969. Elvis's version had reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, and the song was about poverty and broken communities. But Cleveland turned it into a gospel anthem. With his choir behind him, the song felt like a cry from the soul. It earned him a Grammy in 1975, his first big industry win after years of nominations. His rough voice moved between deep pain and rising hope, always balanced by the smooth harmony of the choir. This was when the world began to see Cleveland not just as a gospel singer, but as someone who could take secular songs and turn them into something holy. That same year, 1975, Cleveland took gospel music across the Atlantic. In London, over 10,000 people gathered to watch him perform. Most of them had never experienced anything like it. Gospel music, with its passion and spirit, shook the audience. Cleveland knew how to mix soul and Motown-style rhythm with gospel, making it feel fresh and alive, even for people who didn't go to church. His live album, Jesus is the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, came from this time. That tour made him gospel's first real global voice. In 1977, he joined forces with Billy Preston. Preston had already played with the Beatles and won a Grammy in 1972 for Outer Space. But when he worked with Cleveland, it was different. This time, it was all about gospel. Preston had known Cleveland since he was 10, and they both brought years of experience to the table. With Cleveland's choir and Preston's deep talent, they blended spiritual power with the smoothness of R&B. It wasn't just music, it was a statement. 2 years later, in 1979, Cleveland did something no one saw coming. He helped turn an ancient Greek tragedy into a gospel musical. The Gospel at Colonus took the story of Oedipus and told it through gospel music. Cleveland directed the choir, transforming the Greek chorus into a living, breathing sound of faith and sorrow. It aired later on PBS and got nominated for a Tony Award. People were stunned that gospel music could carry such heavy drama. But Cleveland proved it could. He didn't just make music, he made art. In 1980, Cleveland received the NAACP Image Award. He had already won a Grammy and was being called the King of Gospel. But this award showed that people saw him as more than a singer. They saw him as a leader. He used his voice not just to sing, but to speak out about the value of gospel music. He was the first gospel musician to earn a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He made people respect gospel not just in church, but in the world. By 1982, he was changing gospel music from the inside. His song, "Lord, Help Me to Hold Out," showed what gospel could become. He added modern sounds like synthesizers and complex rhythms that nobody had dared to try before. Critics called it funky. Young artists like Kirk Franklin would later say Cleveland's bold moves shaped their own music. He kept the soul of gospel, but gave it new life. This became his signature sound. In 1985, his vision grew even bigger. The Gospel Music Workshop of America, which he started back in 1968 with Albertina Walker, had now become a massive movement. There were more than 150 chapters and over 30,000 members worldwide. People came from Japan, Africa, Europe, and all over the United States to learn from him. At these events, Cleveland didn't just perform, he taught. He showed how gospel music could evolve without losing its roots. He helped launch the careers of stars like Kirk Franklin, Yolanda Adams, and John P. Key. In 1987, he teamed up with Tramaine Hawkins for "Goin' Up Yonder." Her voice soared, while Cleveland shaped the music around her. It became a gospel anthem. Later, she would receive the James Cleveland Lifetime Achievement Award, showing just how deep their connection ran. The collaboration set a new standard for gospel duets. In 1989, Cleveland's final Grammy came for the album Having Church, which was released in 1990. He had already won 3 Grammys before. This one, his fourth, came posthumously after his death in February 1991. But this album was different. It wasn't just songs, it was Cleveland confronting the pain he saw in the world. Poverty, injustice, broken homes. He poured his life into it, even as his health declined. His voice sounded tired but full of fire. That made it even more powerful. That same year, he performed at the White House. He was 59 and his lungs were failing, but he still brought the house down with "I Don't Feel No Ways Tired." It was aired across the country on PBS. It was a performance that told the story of his life, fighting through struggle, lifting others, always holding on to faith. His final album, Having Church, came out in May 1990. One of the most moving tracks was "What Shall I Do?", written by Quincy Fielding. It reflected Cleveland's life on Chicago's poor South Side and all the hardship he'd lived through. The songs on that album weren't just pretty melodies. They were cries for justice and hope. It was gospel music that looked the world in the eye and told the truth. That same year, he held the biggest gospel music workshop convention of his life. 15,000 people came. The choir had 3,000 voices. Cleveland pushed through pain and sickness to be there, even starting mentorship programs for over 500 teenagers. He wanted to make sure the next generation had everything they needed to keep gospel alive. Many who were there said they could feel it was his last. There was something final in his voice and his eyes. Later that year, he joined Andraé Crouch on tour. They filled arenas, combining Cleveland's traditional choir sound with Crouch's contemporary style. They used drum machines and synthesizers, and the result shook gospel music to its core. It proved gospel could evolve and still keep its soul. The shows drew more than 10,000 people a night. Many came because they believed it would be their last chance to see the King of Gospel perform live. In January 1991, just weeks before he died, Cleveland recorded one final message. He was very sick. His voice was weak, but he wanted to speak to his choir one last time. He told them to stay united, to keep the music alive. Miraculously, his voice came back briefly just for that moment, and he used it. That video became his goodbye. After he passed, people argued over his estate, which was worth $4.5 million. But the real treasure was his message, his music, and his love for gospel. James Cleveland never married. He lived 59 years and kept his private life quiet, almost hidden, even though he became one of the most important names in gospel music. Behind the spotlight, he made sure to look after his family. In the 1970s, he quietly set up trusts to support his sister and nieces. By the time he died in February 1991, his estate was worth between $4 and $6 million. He had carefully planned how this money would be used, setting up something called the James Cleveland Trust. He didn't just care about his closest relatives. He also made sure others in his life were taken care of. Because he never married or had a traditional family, he used his time and money to create his own version of family. But after he died, everything turned messy. People came forward, claiming they were part of that family too. Some said they deserved part of the estate. That trust he built so carefully ended up pulling his private life into the public eye. Back in 1968, a woman named Esther moved into James's home in Windsor Hills, Los Angeles. She brought her 12-year-old son, Andre McIsaac. For the next 12 years, James took care of Andre completely. He gave him a home, paid for his education, and gave him emotional support. Andre even changed his last name to Cleveland. On paper, James listed Andre as a dependent on his taxes every year. He even talked about adopting him, but Esther didn't agree. She wanted Andre to keep her family's name. James had done things like this before. He took in children who had no father, no stable home. He tried to give them love and safety, but his kindness raised questions. Some people started whispering about his personal life. Gospel historian Anthony Heilbutt later said that James was widely known to be gay in gospel circles, even though he never spoke about it publicly. The way he lived, with people coming and going, with boys being taken in and cared for, made people wonder. Still, he never responded. He kept everything locked away. But there was one connection that stayed secret until after his death. In 1965, before Andre came into the picture, James had a daughter. Her name was LaShawn Cleveland, and her mother was John Irvin, a member of his church. Nobody knew about this relationship while he was alive. Jean kept singing in the choir, and James became more famous every year, but they never made the relationship public. Still, James didn't forget LaShawn. When he created his trust, he made sure to leave her exactly $100,000. That would be about $200,000 today. In the trust documents, she was called his daughter. That one line in his papers proved everything. But the public only found out about her after he died, when Jean came forward during the estate fight. James didn't just have a few close people around him. He built a huge family network. Every year during the holidays, his house filled with over 50 people. They weren't just blood relatives. They were children he helped, church members he mentored, people who needed something. Love, stability, a second chance. His house in Windsor Hills became a safe place. Andre later said that James was his father in every way that mattered. Through church, music, and deep personal bonds, James created a family that didn't follow normal rules. He believed that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choosing people and taking care of them for life. But while he gave love and comfort to so many, James also struggled silently. In the 1980s, he had serious health problems. He was dealing with obesity and diabetes, but he never let the public see that side. He kept performing. He kept touring. He kept running the Gospel Music Workshop of America. He didn't want to seem weak. He wanted to be strong for the gospel world. Only his closest helpers and doctors knew how bad things were. He worked until the very end, pushing through everything until he passed away in February 1991. It was only later that people began to realize how much he had been hiding. 8 months after he died, everything exploded. In October 1991, Andre Cleveland, who was now 34, filed a lawsuit. He said he was James's adopted son and that he deserved half of the $6 million estate. But the court found out that Andre's real name was Andre McIsaac, and there were no adoption papers. He had 16 years after turning 18 to make the adoption legal, but he never did. The court ruled against him. Legally, he wasn't family. He received just $10,000, listed in the trust, where James had called him a friend and godson, nothing more. That legal decision pulled apart everything people thought they knew about James's relationships. People in the gospel world had always known James was different. Some said his sexuality was an open secret. His deep voice and calm appearance didn't match what many expected. He was seen at private parties in cities where he toured. Some of those parties were hosted by Reverend C.L. Franklin, Aretha Franklin's father. Researchers from Northwestern University said James helped bring many gay men into the gospel world. Still, no one talked about it openly. His relationships with male protégés were quietly accepted, but never spoken of in public. After his death, more rumors started spreading. The official cause of death was congestive heart failure, but BLK magazine and other sources shared a different story. They said James had died from AIDS-related complications. These reports came from people in the church. Then came something even more powerful. Christopher Harris, a foster son of James who had once used the name Christopher Cleveland, said publicly that James died of AIDS. In 2012, Anthony Halebut said again that Cleveland was widely known to be gay. This made the AIDS rumors feel even more real. And because Cleveland died in 1991, right when the AIDS crisis was at its worst, the truth became even harder to ignore. Mainstream media didn't say much, but black LGBTQ+ magazines did. They told the story no one else wanted to print. Then came the biggest shock of all. During the estate fight, Jean Ervin came forward again. She confirmed that LaShawn was James's only biological child, and she crushed Andre's claims. She said clearly that he was not adopted. He was just one of the many homeless children James had helped. She explained that James gave many young people food, shelter, and support, but never adopted any of them. Her words carried weight. She was a church member. She was LaShawn's mother, and her daughter was listed in the trust as James's real child. With no legal will and so many people claiming rights, the estate battle turned into chaos. Business manager Annette Mae Thomas said she created a trust the night before James died and made herself the trustee. That raised eyebrows. Andre wanted half the estate. Jean Ervin spoke up for her daughter. And then Christopher Harris filed a $9 million lawsuit. James had sold over 100 albums, won 4 Grammys, and founded the Gospel Music Workshop of America. With no clear plan in place, the estate turned into a legal war. In February 1992, 1 year after James died, Christopher Harris dropped a bomb. He said James sexually abused him for 5 years, starting when he was just 13. He also said James gave him HIV. Harris said Cleveland was a practicing homosexual and used his position to control and abuse him. He said church members knew what was going on but chose to stay silent. Harris didn't want to go through a public trial. The case was settled out of court. He was allowed to talk about his story, but not about the money he received. Christopher had joined the choir at 13. He was the only boy alto, tall, full of hope. James promised to help him. But Harris later said it wasn't help at all. He said James used him, played on his dreams, and took advantage of his youth. He said people in the church knew, but no one said a word. James had so much power. He could launch careers, control stages, and silence people. And that's what happened. For years, no one spoke out. Harris said clearly this wasn't about consent. It was about control. Years later, researchers at Northwestern studied James's life again. They said the silence around him wasn't just silence. It was a wall built by the church, by fear, by power. People focused on his sexuality instead of the real crimes. That gave him cover. That kept the truth buried. His case became a painful lesson. It showed how religious power can hide predators. It showed how easy it is to protect the powerful and ignore the voices of the vulnerable. And it showed that even legends like James Cleveland can have secrets darker than anyone imagined.